Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus here with the third piece of 2014 coverage on 2012's Generation Combaticons. This is Swindle, based on his appearance in the Fall of Cybertron video game as he appeared on retail shelves in North America, as opposed to the 3 or 4 other versions. Swindle's vehicle mode is a bit more of a shoe than his in-game model, but not to any real depreciating degree. Most all of the major details are sculpted in. You can plug his gun in up top and roll him around with some success. Swindle's retail coloration is basically a brighter and more solidly yellow take on his tanned game palette. It's a slightly pale yellow that contrasts really well against the black, purple, and gunmetal that make up the rest of what you see in his vehicle mode. And unfortunately, a lot of what you see is unpainted if it isn't purple or gunmetal. Swindle almost makes a clean getaway from his 2012 paint app count, suffering the most when you look under his upper plating and see the black void of his wheels, grille, and pipes. For what could have been a simple stand-up and extend limbs transformation, Swindle adds a few extra turns and swivels to try and spice things up. I actually find it borderline amusing that his little forearm pipes almost unnecessarily swivel around and add to the parts count. It's disappointing that his shoulder armature ends up without a lock-in point, but at least there are several for his torso plate. Swindle's robot mode looks pretty okay. From the front! Like his vehicle mode, proportional liberties are taken, but many key visual details are sculpted in from the in-game model. But man, those proportional liberties! His upper body feels like it just never finished compressing together. Everything is sized for a smaller robot, but inflated just enough to make all the extra airspace really noticeable in a bloating way. Swindle's actually got a decent head sculpt, but it's also the biggest victim of his 2012 decreased paint budget. His goggles are empurpled, but everything else? Black plastic. And that same black void effect from the bottom of his vehicle mode returns on his midsection, leaving everything from his pecs down to his knees kind of visually blurred out. We got us a simple head swivel up here on the Swindle noggin. You could call it the Swindle swivel if you wanted to be super creative. The shoulders can go forwards and backwards. They're on a ball joint connection, but, well, how do I describe this? The ball socket is in here, and the socket part is going up this way. So to get outwards motion, there's more of like this hinge working back here along with the limited range of the ball joint, and then it kind of crashes into stuff up here, and generally I feel it doesn't really do a very good job of going farther than, like, you know, that. Bit of a bummer. It's a ball jointed elbow down here, so there's an inbuilt swivel. And that's about it. There's a waist joint, a delightful mushroom-pegged simple waist joint that accomplishes so much. This is one of those times where the waist joint does a ton to help this figure out. There are ball-jointed hips that have a pretty decent range in both major axes, and there's a good thigh swivel and a hinge knee. Now, there's a problem with this knee. The problem with this knee is it is so high up the leg that when you bend his leg, like, there's all this leg is still here. There's this tiny bit up here. I feel like bending his leg accomplishes nearly nothing and kind of destroys the ability for his legs to emote beyond, like, just standing like this. Anything else that I do generally just looks milquetoast and ineffectual. If you do want to, his toes can point down due to the transformation, and that's about it for his posability. It's pretty disappointing, because there are a lot of points of articulation here, but the only one that really impresses me is that waist joint. And then, like, the elbows and the neck are fine. Everything else is just surprisingly limited in scope, or at least in emotion. Like, his legs especially, the ball joint, thigh swivel, knee joint, yet I can barely ever get him to look like he's really convincingly doing much other than standing, either straight or squatting slightly. And that's about it. And it doesn't help that there's also this enormous monstrosity of a skeleton set up, you know, behind his chest thing. The rear view on this guy is pretty terrible. As for the plastic quality of this 2012 piece, it's there with the other Fall of Cybertron Bruticus guys I've looked at so far. Nothing feels bad. Like, it feels like a good plastic. There's just not a ton of it. Nothing's creaking. Nothing is, like, squeaky or bending. The materials used are fine. The construction of him is fine and durable. He can take a pretty hard spill, but there's just like this, this whole setup back here. And it doesn't help that, it looks like his head should be here, but his head is up here. So, yeah. Posability is moderate. Plastic quality is fine. There's nothing build quality-wise with this guy that's really fallen apart. Everything is solid, it's just that the engineered ranges on everything is kind of a bummer. Swindle is my least favorite Generations Combaticon figure. He's not got the worst of everything by far, but he simply has the worst mixture. And of all its sins, the most critical is how much he does not look like a member of his own team. The Swindle figure simply does not mesh together with the other four, as far as I'm concerned, and that is a crippling blow to his scorecard in my eyes. I know many will not agree with my reasoning, but I've found more to like in every other Combaticon. Even Swindle's greatest unique trait, his decent suite of articulation, gets stunted somewhat by his proportions. If this figure had eschewed some of his girth for the sake of, say, locking shoulder mechanisms, I think we'd be having a much different story. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and I've discussed all but my top 2 Generations Combaticons at this point. So let's take to the sky, where these flawed figures give me the most individual tickles.